Welcome to another episode of Six Figure Secrets for Fractional Experts. My name is Bradley Jacobs. I'm your host. And today on the podcast, we have a special episode with Greg. Greg, thanks so much for joining us and agreeing to participate in this.
Pleasure.
And today we're going to work through a live coaching session where we're going to nail down your ideal customer, their pain points, and your unique value add. And the goal really of this is to have one, clarity into that, but two, even come up with some copy messaging that you can use both in LinkedIn outreach or LinkedIn posts, maybe your LinkedIn headline, your LinkedIn bio, any website you might have, and then clarity when you're actually talking to customers, whether it's a potential client or even just a friend, like, hey, Greg, what do you do? And you just have that kind of clarity. Does that all make sense?
Yep.
All right. So this is a real coaching call, and then everyone will get a chance to see this, to see one, how it works, and maybe two, get some inspiration from both the process but the outcomes as well.
I'm okay being a guinea pig. It works.
All right. Well, we've done this many times. So the guinea pig piece is just sharing it externally.
Sounds great.
So give the audience and myself a maybe 30, 40-second overview on your professional experience to date.
Okay. So I have been a recruiter or in talent acquisition for over 30 years. I grew up in Silicon Valley. Technology is kind of part of my DNA. I've worked for some of the largest companies, Intel, Apple kinds of things, all the way down to small startups. Have figured out that my niche, to my belief, is smaller to mid-sized companies, high EQ management, typically those who share some gray hairs with me.
Why do you say that?
Style, having high EQ, they're, I wouldn't say anti-Y Combinator, but they've looked at the process of growth for the sake of growth versus growth to meet customer expectations or growth to meet certain very specific needs, and always growing within the means, as opposed to, let's say, grow, and then chasing more money to say, this is how big we are, we need more money. That's killed a lot of companies.
Yeah. Cool. So the goal of this process is going to really identify where you stand out, right? There's lots of recruiters out there, whether it's full-time, independent, and recruiting agencies, right? That have bigger recruitment companies. So we need to find that sweet spot for you where you completely stand out, where you're different, where you add this unique value that's really going to resonate with someone on the other side of the phone. So if you say, hey, I'm Greg and I do this for this person, that, let's say, founder or COO or some C-level executive says, holy shit, like we need to work with you. Like, you are the guy, right? And so that's the end goal of what the messaging should accomplish. Any questions about that?
Nope. It's something that I have sought after. I know what I bring, but it's hard to bring that down as a message.
Yeah.
And I've worked on it over and over again with my LinkedIn profile, and where I'm in an incredibly crowded marketplace.
Yeah. And getting more crowded by the minute. Everyone wants to work for themselves, going out on their own. So this work, and you're not alone. It's very common it's challenging to figure out what is that 1-2 line messaging that just hits home the unique value, right? Yep. So that's why this work is valuable and what we're about to get into.
Yep. And in particular in the world of recruiting, we're in a spiral. The industry as a whole, the changes going on due to AI, perception of changes due to AI. I won't say it's really changing us yet. The overall economy, jobs, those of us who are recruiters, we're truly the last hair on the tail of the dog. We're whipped around left and right, and we're first in growth. We're first out when it comes to the financials. So it's a really interesting careers path.
I hear you. Okay, cool. Let's get into it. So When we think about that perfect company for you, the company where you get in the door and it's a game changing experience in what they're trying to accomplish with you, how would you describe that company in as much detail as possible?
So I went into it a little bit earlier. So my best clients, ones that I've had for the longest period of time, have been established companies.
What does that mean? Let's get really specific here.
So I'll grab the latest one, which is one of my favorites. 27 years old.
Okay.
I joined them. They were 40-ish people. They're a tech company. They're in healthcare. They're in an industry that does not innovate really, really quickly because of regulatory environments. And it is a do it right versus do it fast mentality. Whereas I've my kids have heard this. There are companies that say run fast and break things with sharp objects. I don't operate the best under those environments because we're dealing with people's lives. And I want to be sure that when I'm dealing with a candidate, their end point, when I'm done, is a better point in their life. I'm one of those recruiters who really, really cares. Deep empathy in terms of where I want people to land. A lot of companies will just forego all that. No, come in, innovate, be fast. It's okay to break things. You can't break things in healthcare. So I really like that environment. Their founder, or one of their original founders, was the CEO. He used to be the CTO. Very methodical, thinking about things, getting things done correctly the first time. That's a really unique kind of environment in tech. And I've gravitated towards companies that share that kind of mentality.
I want to be careful around what I'm hearing you say is the ethos of the company and how they go about building the business, navigating challenges, et cetera, is incredibly important to you in working with those kinds of companies.
Yes.
And that is information that we are going to identify when you're on the phone with someone. It's very difficult to identify that from any kind of external data.
Yep.
So let's take those things to the side for a second, because that's going to be more in your evaluation criteria of do you want to work with that company? We're going to focus right now on the attributes, like the superficial attributes, let's say, of the company. Like, how big are they? One of the things I heard is they're at least probably 15 to 20 years old, right? You gave 27 years old as an example, but you want them to be established. So that's point number one, data point number one. I'd say at least, what do you want to go with? At least 20 years old?
I'll say 10 plus.
Okay. So 10 plus years old. And how big are they from an employee size?
25 to 3, maybe 500.
Okay. So I'm going to challenge you a little bit there, because I think a 25 person company versus a 500 person company have incredibly different challenges.
Yep.
So let's try and narrow it to a smaller range. If you had to pick a much smaller range, what would you say?
Let me clarify that. I'll push back on you on this one. There are 3 to 500 person companies who act the same as 25 to 50 person companies. There are very few of them that are 500 and larger who can still do that, of bureaucracy and how things get done. What I like being is the sole talent acquisition person in a company. And I've done that with companies as large as 500 people. Beyond that, you can't do it if there's any kind of even turnover becomes too great. But you can still operate as a company with having the right people in positions. Literally 300 people, one talent acquisition person with not a large amount of turnover and not a vastly high rate of growth. That's acceptable. And that's where I base it on, is my ability to be the single person in charge of a function.
Yep. Cool. So that's really helpful. So let's pick the most common situation. Like, there's always going to be exceptions or the long tail of things, but you being the sole talent acquisition person at the company, Is that more likely at 25, 50, 100, or is it more likely at 200, 300, 500?
200 and less.
Okay. So let's do that. Let's do maybe, I'm going to say 50 to 200
That'll
employees.
work.
Okay, great. So that's going to be size. And I think another key thing you just said is they probably don't have, before you, they don't have a talent acquisition individual. Is that fair?
It can be they've had it and it's not, and they've gone away. It could be they've never had it when it's a much smaller company. It can be either way. It can be, they've never had it and they now need it, or they've had it in the past and for whatever reason it's gone away.
But the point is, in this present moment, they do not have a VP of recruiting or head of recruiting or any of those kinds of titles.
Yeah, no recruiter all the way up through.
Right.
No VP of recruiting.
Perfect. As far as industry, product type, customer type, right? My guess is you can recruit for anybody, but like, who's the best fit for you?
Tech company, number one. And tech could go into healthcare, tech could go into cannabis, tech could go into tech. I like techie companies. Those are shiny objects for me. Those are always good. I also really do enjoy trades, which is really strange, but I'm a deep believer in trades and manufacturing stuff.
Okay, great. B2B, B2C, does it matter?
Most of my stuff has been B2B.
Okay. And then from a product type, and we talked about tech, there are tech marketplaces, there are SaaS companies, there's data companies. Does it matter? Is there a specialty at all there?
Most of it has been a product, okay. SaaS, internet product kind of thing, but have touched physical technology,
okay,
etc. That is of less importance to, is it a great company? Is it a good story for me to tell?
Yeah. And again, that's something that you're going to get on the phone with the founder, ask a bunch of good questions, see what their story is, and do you want to recruit and tell that story?
Yep.
Right. Yeah. And from a geography perspective, United States, elsewhere?
I have recruited across 17 time zones.
Okay. So anywhere?
Anywhere.
Great. So anywhere in the US, is it English speaking?
No, anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world.
It does not matter as long as the language of the business is English.
Okay. All right. So we have the companies at least, I'm just going to give the quick rundown, see if we want to add anything. Companies at least 10 years old. We said 50 to 200 employees from a size perspective. They do not currently have any kind of recruiter, head of recruiter, talent acquisition person at the company. Generally tech company or trades companies, trade/manufacturing. Tech, give examples you gave, healthcare, cannabis, or just really any general tech. Customer type, B2B preferred. Product, SaaS, some sort of internet product, but also you've worked in physical products. That's a little bit less important. And geo, anywhere in the world, as long as the language of the business is English.
Yep.
Okay, great. So that's going to be enough to narrow down our ideal customer profile. So there's going to be, probably a few thousand companies, frankly, that fit this criteria, which is fine. We might want to get slightly more narrow, but I think this is a good enough place to start. And so now we want to paint the picture of this company that is growing, that is in a situation. They have 100 employees. They're 15 years old. They're in cannabis, let's say, cannabis tech, and they don't have a recruiter, but they're growing. What is the pain point that this company is feeling right now without you and without this recruiter?
There can be multiple pain points. One could be literally a lack of centralization of where everything goes in and out. It can be a poor candidate experience because nobody's managing it and everyone's doing it differently. It can be that hiring managers and teams are overwhelmed with how do they coordinate actual interviews, the scheduling of those kinds of things, it can be both too many candidates, or it could be, I don't have enough candidates. We don't have a central place to do anything. We don't have an ATS. And we've reached the point, hey, we might get audited because of this. It could be it could be a Glassdoor rating that's 1.8. There's so many points of failure in the talent acquisition process that affects your product image, your company image, your morale, everything.
Some of these things are key pain points and emotions associated with them. Some of these things are an outcome, like a poor candidate experience is an outcome. What would the company be feeling, for example, if there was a poor candidate experience? Like, what would be
declines
in?
And interviews. Your internal hiring team hates to interview. They don't want to hire. They know they need to hire people, but they hate going through the process. Internal within talent acquisition, I call it friction. If your process has a lot of friction, people don't want to do it.
So if people don't want to do it, and if the internal team hates hiring, what ends up happening?
They don't meet their financial goals.
The company doesn't.
The company doesn't. Internally, you have bad morale. People don't, it's a drudge to go to work if you know you're overworked, but also you don't have the time to put forth to interview to relieve yourself of that extra work.
Yeah.
You get caught in a loop.
Let's talk about the founder or CEO. The CEO of the business, what is he or she feeling as a result of all of these pains?
The reality of this, my answer to that is usually nothing. Usually there are people that are blowing sunshine. They're like, oh no, we've got it. No problem. No, very, very infrequently do CEOs really, really get what it's like to try to hire for their company. They see things through rosy glasses. They hear things from their people that is, oh no, it's all good. How really often do you hear in a private company, we're not making what we thought we were going to make this quarter? How often do you hear them saying, individuals who to some degree don't know the function, hey, we're having a hard time recruiting. They don't know what the metrics are. They might think, oh, we lose 40% of our candidates. They might think that's okay. I'll come in from a talent acquisition perspective and say, no, you should be at a 95 to 100% acceptance rate to your offers. Here's why. CEO will never hear that.
So who does feel that pain? Like, who's the highest level person of the company that feels this pain most acutely?
Maybe COO, if there's an HR person, but if they don't have a talent acquisition person, maybe the HR person's trying to do that. I don't know where it sometimes gets lost.
So it sounds like maybe as you do outreach and we talk about your ideal client, which really ends up coming down to who's the contact, it may not be the CEO is the person for you to reach out to because the pain point that you hit on does not resonate with that person. It resonates with the next level down, whether it's the COO, probably every other C-level, right? If they've tried to hire for their teams, my guess is they've felt some version of any one of these pains, maybe all of them.
And the larger you go in a company, the more insulated the C and the V level executives get to this stuff. Obviously, the smaller the company, everyone feels it.
Right. And that's why the ICP is so important, because if it's a 25-person company, maybe the CEO really does feel this. But if it's a 200-person company, maybe they don't feel it at all.
Mm-hmm.
So who you target from a outreach growth perspective for your business is going to change depending on the size of the company. And that nuance is really important.
Yep. If you don't mind, define ICP for me.
Ideal customer profile. So like all the attributes that make up, like what we were listing at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I should have defined that for you. Sorry. Okay. So let's get down to a pain that really captures all of the detail that we just described. So is it something along the lines of they're not hiring the right people? Like the talent at the company are not the right group of individuals. Is it that everything's a disorganized mess when they try to hire and everyone's just feeling the pain of this disorganization? Is it something else entirely?
I don't think it's hiring the wrong people. Generally, I think that companies do a good job of hiring the right people. If you have smart, invested people, if your team is not the right team, they're just punching a ticket, or they're really not engaged, I'm not going to be able to change that. If you have a good team, a good story, and you just need somebody to come in to just take over this function and get it to be a little modernized, high EQ, high touch, but frictionless process, that's what I'm there for.
Okay. Cool. All right. So if you help essentially implement this high touch, high EQ, frictionless process, then what is going on currently that they don't have this? And what, like, let's summarize that if we can in a concise way.
So there's the interesting thing. If they don't have anybody who's doing this function, then they don't have LinkedIn job posts. They don't have a career portal. They might not have an ATS. Everything recruiting may be very, very haphazard.
Yeah, that's a good word. Cool. So everything recruiting is haphazard. I think it's a great word. And what else would you say? Like everything lives in different places. It's disorganized. It's like, what would you say?
Data lives in different places. There's no consistency to the process, which is super important talent acquisition wise, because you're one wrong question away from a lawsuit that will cost you a tremendous amount of money. Even your job post today, if you're a remote company and you're willing to hire people in California, Massachusetts, Colorado, New York, etc., the difference between hiring there and hiring in Kansas about salary transparency, that's a potential liability. There's all these bits and pieces that it's so ingrained in my brain that I have a hard time even articulating, because it's just so natural for me for doing this for 30 years.
Totally. My guess is if everything is haphazard and the data lives in different places and there's no consistency with the process, like, yes, there's a liability, a legal liability, but my guess is also and you said this earlier, there's a bad candidate experience, which, like, what is the result of that bad candidate experience in your mind?
Let me add, it's a bad hiring experience, candidate and internal teams.
Okay.
So that's this whole friction, that everything going the mess that exists. You will get bad Glassdoor ratings. Just the whole thing, and that's a spiral by itself. Your candidates will go into this every time you create friction, time you create a problem, a candidate becomes less engaged. They're less thinking that this is the great company I want to work for. It makes the whole process of getting to an offer, if the offer is a surprise, if the number on the offer is a surprise, you've not done a good job at the very first meeting. The acceptance of a job should be literally what I call is the cherry that is on the whipped cream that's on the cake. You should have already eaten the meal.
Do they lose out on great candidates?
Absolutely. When I put my process in place, and I want to say my process, when you put in a great process in place where you are being brutally transparent,
Mm-hmm.
if you are being super high EQ and there's no secrets any step in the process, and you pre-close from the beginning, hey, this is our budget. And when you come in and the person's interviewed and you make an offer that is in that budget number, there was no surprise. And the actual physical offer, but we don't even do physical offers, the electronic DigiSign of that offer doesn't even go out until the person has accepted the dollar number and we've already agreed on the date that they're going to be joining. And they don't even get to that point until we've already said, hey, this is the next step or this is the last step. We're on track to do this on this budget, all these other things. What's your timing? What are your vacations? Do you have stock options that are vesting? If you're doing salesperson, are you going to President's Club and has your significant other already bought their bathing suit? Well, you can't join until after you've come back from that because you won't have a significant other to come back to. If you do everything right, your offer acceptance rate is 100% because they'll drop off these steps earlier than that.
We're going to summarize. We jumped ahead a little bit, and that's okay because we were going to get there anyway.
You're going to edit it.
Yeah. This is part of the process. It's never perfect. But we're getting the data we need. So what I have for the pain really is that everything is haphazard. The data lives in different places. There's no consistency. There's no real structured process. And the result of that is a bad candidate in hiring experience where you're losing. I think candidates will lose respect for the company and the company will miss out on great candidates, maybe the best candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Any changes you'd make to that?
Trying to think, is there a way of adding the fact that you have the internal friction, the resistance to hire?
Because it's such a bad experience both ways.
Yeah. Does the internal team at some point say, I'd rather have to do the extra 4 hours of work
right
a week and not have to go through the process of trying to hire a person into this company?
So we can have a few different versions of this and you can essentially test them. So you can figure out which one is more resonant. Is it this haphazard data lives in all these different places, we lose out on the best candidates, or there's this massive internal resistance to hire? We don't want to add all these different pains and we're trying to get to one. So we can come up with, two versions of this and test it.
I think ultimately your ultimate pain from a talent acquisition standpoint is if you can't hire, and whether that's, you can say good people, the right people, if you cannot hire to your needs, your business will suffer.
All right, let's talk about your unique value add. We started to get to it. You implement high touch, high EQ, transparent, frictionless process where your offer to acceptance rate is 100%. Anything you'd add to that?
You need the word or the concept of repeatability.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's a repeatable process.
Yeah. Across every team, every function, your entire organization.
Awesome. What else?
The value add that I bring, I believe, is being fractional. It's a turn on, turn off. It is when you need it. It's also a turn on and leave alone. I am a very independent, don't like to be in a lot of meetings, don't like to be on site. That's a couple things. But on the flip side is I'm the best promoter of a company. I have an internal engine of amount of energy that is being very much held in check as I'm sitting in front of this camera.
Compared to when you think about all the other recruiters out there, full-time, part-time recruitment agencies, what is the top thing that differentiates you from those million other people out there?
I really, really care. That is it. There's a lot of recruiters who will simply chase dollars in the agency world. Fine, go for it. I've been in an agency world. You can do that. There's a lot of recruiters who internally are doing a job and they're moving paper and they're filling roles. There's very, very few recruiters who really, as like myself, who you could go to a convention and say, hey, can you put this person there and just be a promoter and an evangelist of the company, of the people that are there, and of what the product does. I'm one of those that's really just, when I dive into a company, even though I'm fractional, even though I'm a 1099, the fact that I wear that at this company email means that no one will know that I'm not fractional.
When you say you genuinely care, what do you genuinely care about?
First and foremost, even though a company is paying me, that candidate starts at point A, they end at point Z. That point Z has got to be a better position in their life, or else I can't sleep at night. I can't take a person who's working at a great company, loves their job, and recruit them into a shit environment. No matter how much money I'm getting paid to do that, I could not sleep at night if that was the case. I think that you could probably take out 60-70% of recruiters around the globe and just take them out by that criteria alone. On the flip side is, for the hiring teams, every single one of my hiring managers, my rec owners, I like them. We like each other. We get along. It's fun. Even the ones that are tough, when they're having a conversation with me, we will be smiling. We will have fun. Because what I do is not brain surgery. I'm not an ER. I'm not a trauma surgeon. What we do is got to be fun.
Cool. So I think we have enough here to start kind of crafting some language. So, and this language is not going to be perfect, but we can get to a decent spot. So what we want to get to is we want to get to a few sentences where, again, when somebody reads it, they not only feel heard in their own experience, they resonate with that experience. It's their own experience, and they understand what you do and what makes you different. We want to do all of that in like 2 sentences.
I should pull up LinkedIn. I should pull up my own LinkedIn profile and say, what have I written it down already?
Well, we're starting from scratch anyway, so it's okay. We've already done all the hard work to compile this sentence. And what I like to do is I like to make it really simple. We're going to identify who we work with in the first part. It's like and maybe even a title, right? I am a fractional head of recruiting, right? So let's just start simply. I am a fractional head of recruiting.
I say I'm a fractional talent acquisition executive or professional.
Great.
Fractional talent acquisition professional is what I'll use on a lot of things.
Okay. And then we need, so I am this, and then it's who do I work with, or what do I do for them, or what spot they're in now. So I'm a fractional talent acquisition executive who, let's do the value add, who implements. We could use kind of the first thing we came up with, who implements a high touch, high IQ, transparent, frictionless process. And again, we can wordsmith this later. We're just trying to get into a little bit of a draft here.
Mm-hmm.
We can wordsmith later. So we just want a draft right now. So fractional talent acquisition executive who implements a high touch, high IQ, transparent, frictionless process. And now we can get on the pain point here to, maybe it's for who? For tech.
SMEs, small mid-sized enterprises.
Great. For tech SMEs who have a disorganized, I like haphazard. Let's do haphazard. who have a haphazard approach, who currently have, to hiring, leading to a bad candidate experience and low. I don't know if we want to go there, but we could say and low acceptance rate, low candidate acceptance rates.
Yep, that is a long sentence.
It is a long sentence. We can we'll wordsmith and we'll cut stuff. But so far we have, I'm a fractional talent acquisition executive who implements high touch, high IQ, transparent, frictionless processes for tech SMEs who currently have a haphazard approach to hiring, leading to a bad candidate experience and low candidate acceptance rates.
So what I do is by what I say is I do a frictionless process. And now my presumption in my own brain is a person can insert their own pain point of what their friction is. They might say, "Oh, my hiring team sucks in terms of interviews. My I don't get this." By just creating the word frictionless, they're able to insert what their own pain is.
Yes, and you want them to know that you get it. It's legitimizing for you when you call out their pain point.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to nail that, and we want the right language. And you might refine this language in your next 5 conversations with clients when you say some version of this haphazard, mess you got going on, right? And then you can say something like, "Does that sound right?" And they might rephrase it. And when they rephrase it, you can update this sentence based on the language that they use, because you want this to land. You want this to hit home for that person.
Concern is that one person's primary pain point is a different from another person. So the idea of having this very large, all these different things works. My own language skills says you try to be, it's like coding, try to be as elegant as possible by using the fewest number of characters. But then I lose that checkbox, checkbox, checkbox in the longer sentence. So that's a balance in my brain that I have to worry about.
You don't want to be so granular that it only resonates with 1 out of 1,000 companies. And you don't want to be so high level that it like kind of resonates with everybody, but doesn't really resonate with anybody.
Yep.
Right. So yes, we are trying to find that level of detail where it like hits home and applies to enough companies where they're like, yes, we get it. And I think, to me, the haphazard approach to hiring with data all in different places, I think is a good level of detail. I mean, you'll see, right? You'll have to test it. That's part of this. We're just trying to get to a good first draft. But, and I think another place you can cut some language here is high touch, high EQ, transparent, frictionless process. It's just too much.
Yep.
So you want to pick maybe the 2 of the 4 that resonate the most as far as the value that you bring.
High EQ and frictionless. Probably it's frictionless, high EQ.
Okay, great. So frictionless, high EQ process for tech SMEs who currently have a haphazard approach to hiring, leading to a bad candidate experience and low candidate acceptance rates.
Yep.
I don't think that's too long, personally. I think that's fine. I mean, if you look at my LinkedIn headline, it's a pretty long sentence, and it's okay. I've never had a problem with it. I get lots of conversions as far as, to leads and things. So, and I think it's not too long to read either, that you can send in a message. And you can have different versions of this. When someone asks, "What do you do?" You may not always give this long sentence. You might say, "I'm a fractional recruiter for your business." And then if they want more detail, you know how to give more detail. But I think of like, if my cousin asks me what I do, my first answer is, I'm a business owner, right? It's like, I don't, and then like, okay, what kind of business? What are your business do? Then I can add more detail. But depending on who's asking me, there's a different answer of specificity.
Yeah, my high level snarky answer is I'm a paid thief. You're like, what?
That works for a certain person. What you can do kind of is, as you're then, you want this sentence to basically be your hook, if you will, of I'm interested in talking to you if this resonates. And then on the call, I can talk about, because what we didn't include here is your passion, your care, right? All that kind of stuff that is really important. So that's things that you can add in your LinkedIn bio, for example. And it's certainly something that you can talk to when you get on the phone with these people, of really what sets you apart is that you genuinely care. And every candidate that you interact with, or your companies interact with, your clients interact with, have a great experience. And you're going to do what I wrote down is integrity, right? You're going to do the right thing for the candidate and for the company, and you're not going to settle for less.
Do the right thing even when no one's watching.
Yeah, exactly. So how does this sentence land for you?
It's a good one. I think it's probably very close to what I'm using in my own LinkedIn. I haven't committed that to memory either, but that's.
So right now, and I have it up. So your LinkedIn says fractional talent acquisition leader, curator of great candidate experiences, ATS selection and implementation, TA SME, NorCal guy temporarily in SoCal, send help. To me, what I think is missing from this, and so it's pretty long, the title right now, but I don't think it hits on one, the pain point that the customer is feeling. And I don't think it talks about the unique value add. I think there's lots of people that can put in an ATS, right? But we are talking about a high EQ frictionless process. Like those kinds of variables that add on top of, great, I'm going to implement this thing, is going to what helps set you apart of why they should talk to you versus a million other recruiters out there.
Yeah. So two topics separated. There's one camp that says you use your title for keyword kind of things, and that's where mine's broken up into that. And then the other group that says you use that as an introductory kind of line the way it is. And I don't have any data that says which one works better, and LinkedIn's never going to be able to give us that information. So that's why I went one versus the other.
Fair enough. I mean, you could try a 1 month test, right? See if it changes based on changing it. But the other thing is, even if you go with the keyword style title, in your about page is where I'd want to see more of this kind of granularity about the pain points you solve and the unique value that you add. And that's not currently in your bio as much as you'd want it. I don't really see it there, at least. So that's where when someone is interested or comes up, you come up in someone's search for a talent acquisition executive for a fractional, then they can read more and see what makes you different and why they should talk to you versus somebody else. And then what I really, and this is going to be bonus on top of this, and then we got to wrap up. But what I'd really love to see you do is write a series or record yourself in a series. Like we could take this and chop it up into a number of content thought leadership posts on LinkedIn about what sets you apart, what you've seen. And it's not a self-promoting post. It's a what you've seen work well in companies, what you've seen work not as well, what the mess of the haphazardness creates. You talk about the Glassdoor experiences. I'm sure it's a snowball effect of like unhappy people. You hire bad people, you lose good candidates. There's so much you can share in 30 years of knowledge where if I'm a CEO and see your stuff on LinkedIn, then I'm like, okay, like this guy gets it, right? He knows his shit. He works with a lot of compassion, passion, empathy, integrity. Like Greg's a guy I want to work with, very different than the other people out there.
Yeah, I've go all the way back to Blogger. My brain has said, God, you should get the stuff going your head down. But recording video, yeah, that's not me.
Well, it's not. And yet for the last 48 minutes, that's what you've done with me.
Yep.
Right. So you could take this relatively casual conversation and chop it up and you have all your content right there. And it's video. It's your face. It's your voice. It's no AI here. Right.
Yep.
That's the best thought leadership content. It's just you being you.
Have to either hire an editor and or somebody to ask me questions so I can do this, because this is far more comfortable than me talking to a camera.
Well, it is one of the services that we offer is that we literally get on a call with you for 45 minutes. We ask questions like this, and then we chop it up into 20 posts for the entire month of LinkedIn, and we post it all for you.
Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, that's not why we're here, but we agreed. None of these things are easy, so we make it easy for you. If anyone is watching this and looking to hire you, bring you on, this is one of the benefits of you taking this time to do this with me. How can they find you?
Obviously, LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/G Buechler, GBUECHLER. I don't have my own website. That LinkedIn is where I live and have been there for over 20 years.
Awesome. So, and we will post a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes and attached to the YouTube and Spotify and all of that. So people will easily be able to find you.
Sounds good.
Cool. Any last things to leave our audience with?
Real quick, this too shall pass. It's tough right now hiring. It's tough right now being a candidate. It's tough right now marketing. This too shall pass. It'll go back and forth.
Always does. And for those listening, maybe later, we're in end of August, 2024. So right now the market's tough, and maybe listening to this in 6 months, it'll be different. So in
Awesome.
fact, probably will be. But Greg, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, Bradley.